Shepherd Neame, Bishop's Finger.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. The sun is over the yard arm and it's time for a beer. And I've got some of this. This is local stuff to me. This is the Bishop's Finger from Shepherd Neame. Now, this is another revisiting video because I did review this a while back, about a year and a half ago. And to be honest, I don't think I've really done it justice. I've drunk it many times since. Most recent was last night. I was out with a mate and the local Wetherspoons had it on cask, and it was one of their guest ales, which is a bit unusual round here because every Shepherd Neame pub round here, and believe me, where I live, there are a fair amount, put it that way. They all serve Bishop's Finger. Now, the first time I tried Bishop's Finger, and if you've watched the original video, you're going to hear that story, and I'm going to tell it to you again. The first time I tried Bishop's Finger, when I first started seeing my missus down here, there was a pub around the corner, and it's gone now, sadly. It was a Shepherd Neame pub, and I thought I would give the Bishop's Finger a go. It's one of them beers, along with Old Peculiar, that when you're not into real ales at all, them two names do stand out because they are unusual. Bishop's Finger, it invokes all sorts of connotations. Yeah, who wouldn't like a Bishop's Finger, eh? But it's one of them beers that is almost legendary in the world of real ale. In my opinion, I'm not going to say that, you know, some people, camera members or whatever, are going to disagree with me, but being a local beer, I think it's a really good beer, to be honest. Now, the style is interesting because some people refer to this as an ESB. It's strong. It is 5.4% in the bottle, but on cask it is 4.5, which is a bit of a drop, and in my opinion it does taste a little bit different on the cask. However, it still tastes nice. Now, I was going to get back to the original story. When I first started seeing my missus down here, I used to love the live music scene that was down here in Maidstone. It's sort of, I wouldn't say dying out, but some of the great pubs that used to be around have now gone, unfortunately. But there was one that was a Shepherd Neame pub, and they used to serve Bishop's Finger. And I remember walking in there one night with her and thinking, wow, I've got to try some Bishop's Finger. Never tried it before. I'm going back about 8 years now. And I'm thinking, I've got to try this stuff. It looks amazing. Everyone was drinking it in the pub. So I've ordered a glass of it, a pint of it. Took a mouthful and I thought, whoa, I'm not sure whether I like this or not. And I think it was a combination of two things. Firstly, this is quite strongly flavoured, or it is to the untrained palate. I was drinking it last night and I remember thinking, this is quite mellow, it's quite an easy drinking beer. But when you're an ardent lager drinker, as I was 8 years ago, and I had a pint of this, it's very strongly flavoured. However, I drank about half of it, and I remember thinking, I don't think I like this. But I've revisited that pub when my palate sort of matured, shall I say, and I realised that pub really didn't know how to, well, I wouldn't say they didn't know how to, but they would serve up bad beer. And Bishop's Finger was notorious for being bad. And I think the reason it was like that was because when I revisited it, not many people were drinking it. When I first went there, I did see quite a few people buying it. It may have just been the little window of time, but there was a bloke who was ordering 3 pints of it and someone else beside me was ordering a couple of pints. So it was flowing, but it didn't taste good. And I remember going back there and tasting it, and it really didn't taste nice at all. And I remember saying to another landlord, I said, is there something? And he did say, oh, yeah, the beer in that pub is not great. They really, I wouldn't say they don't know how to serve it again, but he said they really don't serve good beer. So maybe, and that put me off Shepherd Neame completely, and I wouldn't touch a Shepherd Neame beer. But as I've sort of come round now, my palate is matured, and I've tried a hell of a lot of beer. I do realise now that Shepherd Neame do some cracking beers. One of my favourites is the 1698. That is a great beer, which is also called Kentish Ale. Now, I was going to go back to the classification of this. On here, it's got strong Kentish Ale. It's also got that on the 1698, which, in my opinion, is a real throwback. Basically, it's what old ale would have tasted like a good while back, if you know what I mean. And I really like that. It's got a fair amount of invert sugar on it, and it's just nice. I do like it. This stuff, it has been classed as a strong Kentish Ale by Shepherd Neame, or it's been classed as an ESB as well. Now, personally, and this is just a personal thing, I think strong Kentish Ale is a style, because you used to get quite a lot of brewers down here, small independent brewers, and the strong beer that Shepherd Neame do is called strong Kentish Ale. Now, you can argue that Kentish Ale, is it a style? Well, yes and no. It could potentially be, if you're going to be strict, because as you may or may not know, Kent is a traditionally large hop growing region in the United Kingdom. There are three: Warwickshire, Herefordshire and Kent. And this is obviously packed full of Kentish hops, but it's also got Kentish malt as well. So you could argue that Kentish Ale is a style. Spitfire as well, but again, that's another Shepherd Neame beer. But I was mooching about in Aldi today, and this is where I got this from. And they have their own brand of beer. I think it's called the Hop Foundry or something like that. But one of the beers that they do is a Kentish Pale Ale. Now, yeah, you can argue the validity of that. In my opinion, a strong Kentish Ale would be something like this. But Aldi, or whoever contract brews for Aldi, have deemed fit to come up with that. Now, I thought that may be just local, but I did see the little Welsh fella reviewing it a while back, and I didn't really wait till the end, to be honest. I really have a bit of a downer on contract brewed supermarket beer, and I'm in two minds whether to review them again. However, as I say, I was in Aldi today, and I see two of their own brand Oktoberfest beers, and I thought, right, well, I've got to try these just to compare them. And somebody told me in Aldi that they've got Spartan in there, and that's the reason I went in there. And they have, and I bought 4 bottles of Spartan. So maybe I should compare that to their Helles. All in good time. It will be on the channel, trust me. Let's get back to this beer. Right, Bishop's Finger. Yeah, great beer from Kent, from the legendary Shepherd Neame, oldest brewer in the United Kingdom. They originate from 1698, which is the oldest continuous brewer in the United Kingdom at the moment. I'm sure there were older brewers before that, but they haven't stood the test of time. Shepherd Neame has, and it's been brewing in Kent ever since, in lovely Faversham, which is just down the road from me. The name, Bishop's Finger, comes from not what you're thinking. It comes from a sign. Now, these signs were dotted around Kent and the surrounding areas for pilgrims who were going to visit the tomb of Thomas à Becket, who was buried in Canterbury. Now, Canterbury, if you're not sure, is a region of Kent, lovely part of the world, just down the road from me. It's got a lot of history there, very religious town. Obviously there's Canterbury Cathedral there as well, and it's a place well worth visiting. I've got a mate who comes over from Germany, visits there regularly, and drinks Shepherd Neame beer. Also drinks Spitfire, which the irony is not lost on him. Believe me, I do remind him of it every time. How you doing, Norby? Right, if you want to know what these signs look like, they've actually put them on the label. So you've all seen them before, haven't you? That's what they look like. That is what's known as the Bishop's Finger. And yeah, they were dotted about to help the pilgrims on their way. But that's not the only thing about Shepherd Neame that I find interesting. Shepherd Neame was the first bottled beer, or one of the first bottled beers brewed in the United Kingdom. And it was the first strong Kentish ale brewed by Shepherd Neame after World War II. As you may or may not know, rationing was a big thing in the United Kingdom. And it didn't peter out until the 50s, believe it or not. Even though the war ended in 1945, rationing was still in place in the 50s. I think up until the mid-50s, in fact. And it's the reason you don't see fat bastards in photos from the 40s and 50s, because basically you could only eat what was given to you, and if you didn't like it, you fucking ate it anyway. Nobody got fat, everyone done manual labour, and we were basically a nation of athletes. Now look at us, what we've become.
I'm higher in the food chain. Get in my belly!
And I include myself in that because I am a fat bastard. Well, I'm probably not compared to some people, but by my standards, I am a fat fucker. But there you go, I digress again. But this was one of the first malty or heavily malted beers that was brewed by Shepherd Neame after the rationing was discontinued. And that was a big thing because the malt bill on beer during the war and in the early 50s wasn't big because of rationing. Obviously malt was needed for other more important things like bread, etc. So beer sort of took a back seat. I don't know what beer tasted like back then, but I can imagine it wasn't that great. The ABV would have been low because if the malt bill is low, then unless you're adding your own ethanol, which you shouldn't fucking be doing, but unless you pile a load of hot malt in there, the ABV isn't going to be big because obviously the yeast eat on the sugars from the malt. So that was a thing, and it was one of the first bottle beers. As I say, it was brewed in 1958. First brewed in 1958 as a bottled beer as well. Now, just one other thing on here. If you look closely on this label, you will see an EU geographical protected status, denoting that this is a Kentish ale. The weird thing about this, it has some kind of weird ritual that Shepherd Neame have instilled, and that weird ritual is it can only be brewed on a Friday, and it can only be brewed by the head brewer. And that's a tradition that's been kept up as long as it's been brewing, and they're still doing it to this day, which I don't know why, it doesn't mean anything, but it's a tradition. It's one of these quirky English traditions. So there you go. I think that's brilliant. I love it. Shepherd Neame, full of history. Great stuff. Right, and that really is about all I'm going to say about that. So let's get this beer investigated. Right, 500ml bottle, as I said, 4.5%. I can't find a brew sheet on this at all, which is a shame really, but I'm assuming they're using East Kent Goldings. Now, there are a variety of hops that are grown down here. I think they grow the Fuggles down here, Fuggles hops. They certainly grow East Kent Goldings, that's where they originate, and they may grow other Goldings as well, but it's not just East Kent Goldings that are grown down here. And I've actually been on a working hop farm, which is just down the road from me, they call it Kent Life, and I've reviewed a couple of the beers from there as well. And it's quite an interesting place. They still dry the hops using an old oast house, and yeah, interesting stuff. But that's about all you're going to get really. 500ml bottle, 5.4%. There is the cap. Now it's coloured purple because purple is a religious colour, if you like. If you see a lot of the priests' robes and vicars' robes, they're purple. It is an ecclesiastical colour, and that's why that's on the bottle. So it has got a sort of a religious theme on there. If you look on there, there's a bishop's crook. The bishop's crook, of course, is something he would hold, and it would symbolise him being a shepherd, and of course the people in the church being his flock. Personally, I think they're all sheep following a religion, but that's just by the by. That is my personal opinion. If you are religious, if you do believe in God, that is entirely up to you. I respect your beliefs, but it's not for me. Anyway, let's stop gassing and let's get this stuff open. Right, I was drinking this last night along with the Old Dairy Copper Top, which Wetherspoons have on every now and again. That is a beer from the Old Dairy Brewery, which is based in Tenterden, just up the road from me. There's another look at the cap if you want to have a gander. Now, clear bottles, and I can smell what appears to be a little bit of skunkiness. Now, that is a thing in a lot of Shepherd Neame beers. Now, it winds me up when I see lager drinkers doing it. For some reason, and I don't know why, but with Shepherd Neame beer, it actually goes. Would you believe? It adds a bitterness to it. And I know you're probably going to fucking fall off your chairs, but it doesn't taste too bad in dark beer like this. It actually gives it a bit of a... And it really does smell skunky. I will say that. But what I do notice, it doesn't really affect the flavour too much. Now the aroma has got skunkiness and it actually doesn't look that good either. Look at that head dissipating. Fucking hell, I've been building this up and look at the fucking state of it now. That does not look like a good pint. Well, let's fucking reserve judgment. Let's stop all proceedings and see what the fuck is going on with this, because that don't look great. That head's gone. Right, now, again, as I was saying, there is a little element of skunkiness on this. I'm not going to go too much into a rant because Percy's at the door. Come on in, Percy. Come on. And here he is. Come on in, me old mucker. Let's give you a little 15 minutes of fame, or in your case, a couple of minutes. What the fuck has been going on in your life, eh? Get out of it. I know where that tongue's been. What do you think of this? Get out of it. You nearly had some then, little fucker. Don't give your dogs beer. It's not good for them. Right, now, I am actually getting some quite nice aromas from that. There is a skunky aroma on top, but it's very, very slight now. It has dissipated, and it's given way to an almost roasted malt type aroma and sweet fruit. And this is what I remember from Shepherd Neame, certainly from drinking it from the bottles. Not just the Bishop's Finger stuff, but I did notice it in the Spitfire especially, and in the Master Brew as well, and in 1698 to varying degrees. Now I will say, and I've said it on other videos as well, I do think from personal experience that pale beer does get affected more when it's in clear bottles than darker beer does. I don't know why, but that's just a thing. But this is actually smelling quite nice now. There is a nice sweetness to it, nice caramel and almost toffee malt there as well. There's a roasted element to it, but there's quite a bit of fruit there too, like prune, plum, and a bit of an earthy seam to it too, quite a hoppy seam, and it's really nice. I do like that aroma, even though there is a little tinge of skunkiness on it. Now, why is that? I think the other flavours or the other aromas are stronger, and the skunkiness isn't dominant at all. There's quite a bit of fruit on it, and it appears to have almost dissipated. There's still a vague trace of it, but it's not as bad as if this was a clear beer. Now, Percy, I'm going to fucking start drinking in a minute, and I can't drink. Will you? Well, I probably can, actually. I'm not going to put him down yet. Apparently, people or viewers like seeing his little face on the channel. You're famous, mate. He's like a half-hearted Hitler with his leg, isn't he? Anyway, let's get this down the hatch. Bottoms up. Well, this... Oh, that finish. This is... Wow. That is a long finish. This is... What I'm trying to say is, this is what I remember from Shepherd Neame in the bottles. And it's quite a complex beer. So I'm going to try and pick apart all the different flavours from it. Now, what I will say is the bottle is more complex and more flavoursome than cask. And I'm going on what I drank last night, and that was quite a nice pint. It was flowing and it was nice. It was quite well kept. So I'm going to dive in again, then I'll give you the flavours. Oh, lovely and malty. Right, so there's hints of caramel, but it's mainly toffee malt on this. And then shortly after, that's where you're going to get all the fruity esters coming from the yeast. And it's like dark dried fruit. If you can imagine raisin, prune, what else? Just sort of Christmas cake type flavour, if you can imagine that. But there is a bitterness to it, and it's like an earthy, spicy bitterness to it. And you're falling down, aren't you, mate? I can feel you slipping. I'll put you down because you're gonna fall down and you're gonna be in all hell of a state. Go on, get yourself down here, mate. But yeah, there is a bitterness to it, and it's quite a grassy, earthy, and spicy bitterness, almost pepper and cinnamon as well, if you can imagine that, because there is, you know, that cinnamon is usually, in people's perception, it's sweet, because you're normally eating something with cinnamon in it that's sweet, like for example a Danish pastry or something like that. But if you try cinnamon powder, it is quite, I would say, quite bitter. Well, that's how I perceive it anyway. And there is some of that on there. The aroma on this is huge, and it really is toffee malt and big fruit. And it's nice, and that finish lasts on there. Lasts quite a long time. Now, for once, this doesn't really taste, or I can't really get any invert sugar in this, which you can on the 1698. I remember not so long ago I was drinking a bottle of that in a pub, and I did notice the invert sugar, which is quite nice. I do like it on there. I think it goes with that sort of style of beer, that dark, strong ale. It definitely does. But this is nice, and the finish on it goes on for ages, and it's like a biscuity, fruity type finish, and it does go down nice. Now, it doesn't look very appealing, I will say that, because the head is dissipated and there is a fair amount of fizz in there. I don't know whether you can see it. That doesn't really translate to the mouthfeel. It's relatively smooth, and it does go down quite nicely, I will say that. Yeah, quite nice. And I can see why. And this sort of reminds me of the flavour when I first tried it. It had like that big toffee. It's almost like roasted toffee, if you can imagine that. And that was a real shocker to me, because normally when you try a bitter, I know this isn't a beer, this is classed as a strong Kentish ale, but if you wanted to, you could potentially call it a bitter, because it does have quite a nice hot bitterness on here too. So the term, or the people who term this as an ESB, I would say you're not too far off, to be honest. That's if they had called it an ESB, this is exactly what I'd be expecting. Maybe a little bit more bitterness and not as much fruit, but yeah, it's still there. But it's good, nice, easy drinking, typically English. This is what we do. This is what we do best. These kind of beers, malt forward, nice hop character on there, fair bit of fruit, relatively dark, bursting with flavour, and it's, you know, we'll always be renowned for that. And I think, you know, you can follow trends such as the, you know, stuffing beers full of American hops and all that, but I always say, come back to this. It's not boring. The only people who call this boring are people that don't know beer, in my opinion. And there are a few. I mean, there's a couple of beer reviewers. There's one in particular. I'm not going to name names. I've been getting a little bit bitchy lately towards other beer reviewers, but I've been watching other beer reviewers lately, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet. I mean, I get things wrong all the time, and I'm quite happy. In fact, I encourage people to point out my mistakes, because you're only going to learn from them. But there's fucking beer reviewers out there that which just think they know it all, and they really don't, and it's embarrassing sometimes watching them. And there's one beer reviewer, I'm not going to name him because I've mentioned him in other beer reviews, and I don't want to come across as one of these bitchy beer reviewers. I don't give a fuck really, to be honest, but it annoys me. He just flat refuses to review any English beer at all. He reckons it's all crap. Well, that to me says you don't know beer, because if you're just going to dismiss a whole nation's beer, says the bloke who fucking dismisses France's beer. I know I do, but I'm only going by what I've tried. Now, I'm sure there are good beers in France, and I will find one, and when I do, you'll definitely fucking know about it. But I'm only going on what I've tried, right? But this particular beer reviewer just refuses to even entertain the idea of reviewing something like this, which I think is, well, I don't care. To be honest, I really do not care. All I can say is he's missing out. His loss. That's my little rant over. But I'm going to take one more mouthful of this, give you a summary, and then we'll get on to the verdict. Nice. Ton of malt. Overall, all the way through it, there's like a bitterness, and it's like a roasted bitterness, a mixture of malt and hop bitterness, if you can imagine that, and it gives it an almost, if you can imagine burnt bitter chocolate, that's running all the way through it. There's quite a bit of toffee malt on there, and there's a fair amount of fruit as well, but there's a bitterness that runs all the way through it, and it's like a mixture of burnt chocolate and earthy, spicy bitterness, and all in all, it does make for a unique type of beer. I really like it. I think that's a great beer. I've drank it on many occasions, and I think in the last review I'd give it quite a low mark, because again I was quite new to beer the first time I've done it, but now my palate's adjusted and I can compare it to a hell of a lot of other beers, and I think this is a fantastic beer. Shepherd Neame have done really well with it. So what is the verdict on Shepherd Neame Bishop's Finger? Yes, I like it. In fact, I've liked it for quite a long time now. And as I say, I was drinking it last night on cask, and it was absolutely lovely. If it wasn't for the fact that they had the Old Dairy Copperhead in there, which is a great best bitter, and it's rarely on tap down here, I was drinking most of that, but I couldn't resist having a pint or two of the Bishop's Finger. Loved it. It did taste different to this. It was much more sessionable, much smoother, obviously, coming from a cask. I will say about this, it does taste different. So if you're going to compare cask and keg, the flavours are different. Now, I know that's probably not by design, but because this is in a clear bottle, that's definitely done something to the flavour. But strangely enough, and you know my rants about clear bottles and green bottles and skunkiness, I don't think it's done much to the flavour, but there is. Well, it's sort of died down now. Now it's just big fruit, thick fruit, and when I smell this, it just reminds me of England, an English beer, which is probably a stupid statement because it is a fucking English beer, dickhead, but it's, again, as I say, it's what we do best. There's a nice, sweet, fruity aroma, fair amount of toffee malt on that, and then you're more or less getting that in the flavours as well, but you're getting that big, bitter seam all the way through, which is really nice, and it's why it can be classed as an ESB, in my opinion. So, yeah, but I do like this. Lovely, and it's even nicer the more you go down on that, and it's even nicer the more you drink. And I probably drank that a little bit cold. I think it was just above cellar temperature, but I'll tell you what, them flavours were just bursting out. Now it's warmed up a little bit. Still that bitter seam, that roasted bitter seam, but there's a bit more of the fruit coming through now, and it's lovely. I like it. It's what we do best. I am going to give that a solid 8.5 out of 10. I definitely recommend it. Now, I don't know how available this is going to be up north, because yes, you can get some Shepherd Neame stuff up north. I have heard that it's available. I don't know how widespread it is. This used to be available in the United States, and if you're an American viewer, I've heard that they've stopped importing it over there. Not sure why, but again, I think you're missing out. But if you can get hold of some of this stuff, it's dirt cheap. My local Aldi had this for £1.29. Now that is a fucking bargain. Not only is it a good beer, that is cheap. In fact, do you know what? For the price and for that fact, I'm actually going to give it a 9. Because what you're getting for your £1.29 is an absolutely fantastic beer. And why buy the other Aldi own brand stuff when you've got this, which is slightly cheaper, and it's a much better beer? Now, I've reviewed some of it. No, it's not Hatherwood, is it? They've got another name now. I know they do Hop Foundry stuff, but there's another name for it, and for the life of me, I saw it today and I can't remember. Oh, what a fucking dickhead I am. But why buy that when you've got this for £1.29? And that, for me, I've just remembered that now. It cost me £1.29. So that's going to get a 9 out of 10. Not only is it a great beer, if you've got an Aldi that sell it, and I'm not sure that you're going to be able to do that, because obviously I live in Kent, so this is a local beer.
Are you local?
So maybe they've got some deal going on with Shepherd Neame and they get the beer a little bit cheap, because obviously the logistics aren't too far. But if you can get that for £1.29, that is, in the words of The Who, I call that a bargain. The best I ever had. Well, I don't know whether it's the best I ever had, but it's up there with one of them. But yeah, love it. 9 out of 10. Definitely recommended. And remember, beer is working class. Champagne.